Hello there, everybody on UK Crime Book Club. I'm here with Laura Marshall to talk about her latest book, The Anniversary. If you could start by giving us a quick summary of the plot, please, Laura.
Yeah, sure. So, The Anniversary, the main character is a young woman called Cassie, who has recently moved back to her hometown with a young baby. She's a single mum to a young baby, and she's moved back to help care for her mother, who's got early onset Alzheimer's. But 25 years before, the town was a scene of a mass shooting in which 11 people were killed by a man called Travis Green. And Cassie's father, so Cassie was 4 at the time, and her father was the last person to be killed. There's a journalist in town writing a big piece for a newspaper about the 25-year anniversary of the shooting, about how towns move on from tragic events and so on. And in the course of sort of researching the article, she starts to find out certain things that make her realise that not everything they thought they knew about that day is perhaps not true. And there was more to the shooting than met the eye. And she starts to involve Cassie in her research. Cassie finds something in her mother's possessions which indicates that everything she thought she knew about that day is not true. But her mother is kind of unable to answer her questions about it because her memory's so poor because she's got early onset Alzheimer's.
Yeah, Alzheimer's is a really good device for a unreliable narrator. Actually, what was the decision to make go for that?
Yeah, no, I know, and I kind of worried a bit about that because it obviously is, and I have used it in the plot because that's the reason why Cassie's mum can't or won't tell her anything is because she can't remember. But I was wary of using it as a plot device, as you say, because obviously it's something that so many people have experienced, caring for loved ones with dementia. So I was really, really careful and keen to get that bit right. It's not a huge part of the book, but obviously there are scenes between Cassie and her mother, and I wanted to be so careful to get that right. I did quite a lot of research, which I don't normally do that much research for my books because they don't really need it, and mostly I'm just making it up. But this time I thought, no, I've got to get this right because there are going to be people reading it who've been through it. And I hope, that it's a kind of sensitive and realistic and not sort of exploitative portrayal. I actually ended up the copy editor who copy edited my book. Just by chance had just recently been caring for her own mother who had dementia, and actually that was great. And she was the first person to read it who really had that personal experience, and luckily she said I'd really got it right, and she couldn't believe I hadn't been through it myself, and made some useful suggestions as well. So that was a big relief because I really wanted to get that right.
Yeah, well, I think you did because I got an indirect experience with my granddad at the moment, and we got using dementia clocks and stuff. So I can imagine how you did the research. It worked well. Yeah.
Good. Oh, good. I'm pleased to hear.
Yeah, he's currently on early stages, but yeah, it's working well as it came across as accurate. Let's put it that way. Yeah.
Oh, good. Oh, I'm pleased because obviously there's so many people who have experienced it that I knew that people would be reading it who'd been through it themselves. So I'm pleased you say that.
When coming up with a theme for a book, how do you decide on what the theme is? Because both the books I've read have been quite complex themes of yours.
Yeah, I feel like the themes kind of arise themselves out of the story. So because I write crime and sort of essentially like commercial crime, I do start with the plot. So the plot is the first thing, and that will be the actual thriller plot. So my books, I think they are thrillers, but they've also usually got quite an emotional led story that's kind of weaved in with the thriller plot. But I do start with the thriller plot. And then the characters and the themes kind of tend to emerge of their own accord whilst I'm writing, especially the characters, actually. So the book I'm writing at the moment, which will be my 4th one, which will come out next year probably, I haven't really planned it that much. So I'm really finding out loads about the characters as I write. So I know, I already know I'm going to have to go back to the beginning and rewrite loads of it, because I'm suddenly like, oh, that's why that character's always in such a mood or whatever. Like, you know, and I think it's the same with the themes. They tend to emerge as I write from the plot. So the plot, and then the characters will start to form. And then, you know, obviously I knew that she was going to have a baby, and I knew that there was going to be the mum with dementia, because I kind of needed that for the plot. But yeah, they seem to kind of emerge. I don't ever really sit down and think I'm going to write a book about this theme. You know, I'm like, well, I'm going to write this story, and then the theme tends to emerge as I write, kind of thing.
Yeah, interesting what you say about the characters, because you do go into quite a bit of depth about each victim of it, because they have a flashback, and because each one has like a chapter of their own. What was it like writing those?
I love writing those. Sorry. Yeah, no, I love writing those. They're probably my favourite chapters. I mean, they're only short, but I enjoyed writing them, and I wanted to, even though it's not a real massacre, it's a book, but I sort of wanted to honour the people that I didn't want to completely ignore the people that had died. You know, I wanted the story to kind of honour those people, and just to find out a little bit, even though it's just a snapshot, a little bit about their lives, and see the other things they had going on for them, apart from the fact that they were killed in a massacre. You know, just to kind of show the humanity, rather than them just be a name and a list of the fallen, as it were.
I mean, the little chapters, they really did work well to come across the characters. Because I'm at the moment, I've been writing a series of little short stories. When you started, did you start with shorts, or has it always been long form for you?
I don't think I've ever written a short story in my life, apart from school. I don't know if I think I'd struggle, because I don't read a lot of short stories, so I don't feel like I know the form or the genre, if you'd call it a genre. So I think I'd struggle. I'd have to read a lot more, I think, if I was going to write one, because I feel like I wouldn't know how to kind of pace it and structure it. Whereas I've read nothing but crime novels really for probably about 20 years. So I think that the structure and the pacing, I'd almost like taken that in by osmosis, just because I read so much, you know, actually probably less now I'm a writer, probably read slightly less now I'm a writer. But no, I've never written a short story.
What was the first crime novel that made you decide, oh, I think I can have a go at this?
It was The Memory Game by Nikki French. I read it not long after it came out, in the late 90s, I think it was, probably. And I'd read a lot of crime before that. I mean, I loved Agatha Christie as a teenager. Absolutely loved Agatha Christie. And then I read a lot of Ian Rankin as well, actually, kind of in my early 20s, and quite a lot of police procedurals. But The Memory Game was the first book that I'd describe as a psychological thriller that I'd read. So it was the protagonist wasn't the detective. It wasn't a policeman or a private detective. It was just a woman who was involved in the story. So I don't know if you've read it. Have you read it?
I've not read that one, but yeah. I've read others by Nikki French.
That's their first one, actually.
Yeah.
So the woman is she's a protagonist in the story. So she had a childhood friend that was killed when they were about 15, and then years later they find her body buried under a patio at the family home, sort of thing. So there are police involved in it, but they're not very involved in it. And it was the first, and I absolutely loved it. I mean, I still love it. I think it's brilliant. And that was yeah. I mean, I'd always wanted to write, but I think when I read that, I thought, this is the kind of book I want to write. I want to write a kind of emotionally driven thriller, but not. I don't want to write a police procedural. And I think up till then, most of the crime novels that I'd read had either been police or private detectives, like, you know, like Poirot or whatever. But
yeah.
Yeah.
I must admit, I do like journalism characters because they can get into parts of the story that you would not expect.
No, I love that too. Yeah, I think Fiona Cummins writes, because obviously she was a journalist. She writes great journalist characters in that vein.
Yeah. The latest When I Was 10 was actually really good. Yeah.
Oh, brilliant. Yeah, loved it.
What would you say is the biggest challenge in deciding what role you're going to choose for your protagonist?
What, as in their role in the story, sort of thing?
Like what their job is, because if they're not typical police, you can go with any job you could choose.
That's true. Yeah. Well, to be honest, none of my books that I've written has their job been a sort of major part of it. So Louise in Friend Request is an interior designer, but we don't really see her doing it very much. I just wanted something that she could work from home and be quite flexible, really, so she had time to go off, investigating an old crime. Three Little Lies. Can't even remember what her job is. Can you?
No, I can't.
No, it's not very important to the story.
No,
and then
it isn't. No.
This new one, the thing is, Cassie's given up her job, so she's had a baby. She's on her own. She's not with the father. She's had to come back and look after her mum, so she's given up her job. That's actually part of her struggle, I guess, is that she feels she's lost her identity because she's given up her job. She's just caring for her mum and the baby. She's overwhelmed by it. She used to have a job. It's vaguely said that it's in like marketing or something, but I don't really go into it in any great detail. So I suppose the defining thing about her is that she hasn't got a job and she's struggling with the kind of loss of identity.
Because that only just occurred to me when I'm talking about psychological thrillers, because it can be open to anybody, like any kind of role or anything. Whereas the police, you've got to kind of follow a structure.
Yeah, but it is always useful if they don't have a very demanding full-time job, because you do need them to be able to like go around, talking to people and getting into trouble. And if somebody was working a really demanding full-time job, I don't know how you'd get around
that. During the writing process, have you were saying to us before about how the influences on Three Little Lies and how that came about?
Coming up with the story.
Yeah.
So the seed of the idea came from a fam. So the main family in Three Little Lies. The main character is kind of slightly obsessed with the family that lives on her street. So they live in a bigger house than everyone else. And the parents are musicians. They're an opera singer and a player in an orchestra, and they're bohemian and all that kind of thing. And so that seed of that idea came from a family my husband used to talk about when he was growing up. Similarly, they lived on a kind of bigger house than everyone else on the street. The parents were musicians, and he used to spend a lot of time there as a teenager. And compared to his own family, they seemed exotic and kind of bohemian, and they talked about politics and music and stuff which he wasn't really exposed to at home. He wasn't. No, there was no murders or anything, but that was the sort of seed of the idea for the characters. So I suppose that actually, I've said I always start with plot. That book sort of started with characters, actually thinking about it.
When it comes to the background to the books, especially in Three Little Lies, because there's a court case involved in that. Because you must have to go through lots of changes and going flashbacks, because you like to use flashbacks a lot in the two books I've read.
But and Friend Request is quite a lot that's set in the past as well. That's actually, I say I don't do much research. I mean, when I wrote the court scenes for Three Little Lies, I didn't overly research them to start with, because I just wanted to get the story out. So I just wrote them based on my knowledge of like watching court case, watching like court lawyer programs on TV. But then I did send it to somebody who was a barrister just to make sure I hadn't made any terrible errors. And he did point out a few things. You're like, this really doesn't happen in court, only happens on the telly. So I had to change quite a few things. But yeah, so I did get somebody to kind of fact check the court scenes in that book.
And the multiple narrators in Three Little Lies, because you had 3 different narrators in the audio, but what's it like trying to come up with their different voices?
Yeah, again, that's not something I consciously thought about all that much. I think I just was writing from their perspective, so I was just sort of, I mean, I hope the voices were a little bit different. I mean, as in written voices, not the audio voices. But I didn't really honestly didn't really consciously think about that much. I just wrote as the character, and that was just kind of how it came out. So yeah, I hope they didn't all seem the same, but
no, it worked. Yeah. I was just curious because obviously teenage voices are as you get older, there's kind of like different to your own voice, and might be a bit of a challenge to get back into that voice, I suppose.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. So in Friend Request, there's also teenage characters in the past scenes. I didn't find it that difficult. I think even though I'm 46, it doesn't feel like, to me, I don't feel like it's that long since I was a teenager. Obviously, it's a long time.
Yeah.
But it's very fresh in my mind. I think those teenage years are so like formative and kind of everything. I just remember that sense of everything being so heightened, whether it's good or bad. And I don't know. I think I still feels very present in me. My teenage self still feels very present in me.
Yeah.
So I think I was quite easily able to kind of tap into that and those kind of insecurities and the sort of wanting to fit in and all that kind of thing.
I must admit, in my writing, when I'm trying to do it, I do focus on teenagers a lot. What's the hardest challenge you think you've had in the 3 books you've written?
In terms of the writing,
yeah.
I think, I can't think of one specific challenge for any of the specific books. I think always my biggest challenge is procrastination and making myself just get on with it and not finding excuses not to write, which is mad because I love writing. It's like the ridiculous kind of dichotomy of being a writer. This is like all I've ever wanted to do. It's my absolute dream job. But yet then I'll find myself, cleaning the oven. So I don't have to sit down to a blank page. But once I get down to it, it's fine. But sometimes probably always my biggest challenge is making myself just start, because there's always that slight like, just before I start, it's like sometimes I don't know what I'm going to write. Like, so the book I'm writing now, I haven't really planned it that much, which I'm enjoying because it's quite interesting finding out what's going to happen as I go along almost. But sitting down every time is quite hard because I don't always know what I'm going to be writing that day. So I tend to put it off a bit, and then eventually, it's like I've got to get on with this. So I think that's probably always my biggest challenge. Probably always will be.
When I was researching your background and the early books, it said about how long Friend Request was in the back of your mind. How useful was the course you were on to help you finish it?
Really invaluable. Ever would have written it if I hadn't done the course. I just, not because it did help me in terms of craft and structuring and all that kind of thing. But what it really gave me was the confidence to finish it, because that was what I'd always lacked before, because I had started writing books many times over the years and abandoned them, or done bits and bobs of writing, but I'd never showed it to anyone, so I had no idea if it was any good or not. So doing that course, getting onto the course in the first place, and then when I started getting that feedback from so my tutor was Erin Kelly, obviously, who's an amazing and feedback from Anna, who runs the course, just somebody reading what I'd written and saying, oh, this is quite good. That was what I needed. That was what I got from it. I mean, I got other things as well. And I had a meeting with Anna, who runs the course. That was part of the course. You had a meeting with her about halfway through, and she said, I think some of the agents will be interested in this, but you need to write it quickly because psychological thriller is very crowded field, crowded marketplace, blah blah. And that was what I needed. I needed someone to say, Ed, get on with it. You do it because you've got a chance, kind of thing. So if I hadn't had that, I honestly don't think I would have ever finished it. I would have just given up.
When you're on a course discussing it with someone like Erin, what was the best advice that she gave you?
Oh God, that's a good question. I think I always remember one of the things when I'm trying to show a character who somebody is, a character, when we were talking about character, and she said there's different, how do you know as a reader, how do you know what a character is like? It's it's what they say, but it's also what they do, it's also what they don't say, and it's also what other people say about them and how other people react to them. So I'm kind of always thinking about that, I think, when I'm trying to show who somebody is, especially if it's somebody where you're not inside their head. She also said another thing which really stuck with me was you've got to have some kind of, I mean, this sounds really obvious, but some kind of threat or something that the character is desperately trying to avoid or save or stop somebody finding out or whatever it is. So originally in Friend Request, the character didn't have a child, and I think it was Erin that said, I think it was her suggestion, that she said you should give her a child because it just adds a lot more urgency, and then the child can be in danger, or why is she so scared about people finding out what she did, because okay, there's a chance she might go to prison or whatever, and she's got this child, and it just anything that adds urgency and danger and sort of, you know what I mean?
Yeah, the threat in the anniversary must have been a bit more difficult to write about, considering it's in the past and you're reflecting on what's already happened.
Yeah, absolutely. But I suppose the key thing there is that she slowly begins to realise that somebody is trying to stop her finding out what really happened, and that person is threatening her, and her child again, I suppose. So that's where the threat comes from, when she begins to realise someone, and she doesn't know who it is.
Yeah. It's how important would you say tension is in a psychological thriller?
Oh, really important. Yeah, really important. Because you've got, the whole kind of point, I think, well, not the whole point, but, a lot of the point is about getting people turning the pages,
Yeah.
I'm always thinking about that, people of not boring people, and, that one more chapter thing. I know it's kind of a cliche, but that's what I'm always aiming for. So I always try to finish chapters they can't all finish on a massive cliffhanger, because that'd be a bit ridiculous. But I always try and finish them at least on a little question, or somebody thinking, oh, that's not right, or something like that, to avoid that.
Yeah. With that in mind, then, what about the natural flow when the book has to slow down?
Yes, I suppose it can't. That's the other thing, is that it can't be tension, high stakes, cliffhanger all the way through. So I guess that's where you need something else. So I think with my books, the other thing I have is the emotionally driven kind of storyline. So I guess that's almost, maybe, even though it's sometimes quite sad, a sort of light relief. and I suppose you kind of hope that also keeps people turning the pages a little bit, because they want to think, oh, well, how's this going to work out, this emotional situation, even if it's not directly to do with the thriller plot.
When you're working on the emotional tension side of things, how much of how complicated is that to sort out during the editing? Because, as you say, that's normally the slower part of the book. And when you get people reading it for you, like your editors, how much discussion is involved there?
Yeah, definitely quite a lot. I mean, one of the big notes I had on my first draft of the anniversary. So for people who haven't read it, that she's basically single mum to a baby, and she's struggling quite a lot with the baby, because she's looking after it by herself, and she's exhausted and stressed out and not bonding very well with the baby, etc. And one of the big notes I had on my first draft was that there was too much of that stuff. Because I think I was probably like exercising a few of my own demons, because I've got two children. I mean, they're 14 and 12 now, but the baby days are still quite fresh in my mind, and how difficult I found that. So I think I was probably went a bit overboard, because I was using my own personal experiences, and they were like, this is great, we love this, people, it's really relatable, but there's too much. So I had to kind of go through and chop out a fair bit of the kind of, they were absolutely right. My editor was absolutely right, because it was detracting from the pace of the story too much.
I must admit, in my writing, I find that I base it too much on my own experiences. What would you advise to someone about trying to avoid doing that and making sure that your stuff's unique, please?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I would necessarily avoid doing it. Obviously, as I said, I overdid it, but that was just because there was too much stuff of her. Oh God, the baby, not enough. Let's get on with the story. But I think actually, when you use your own experiences, it sounds really authentic, and I think as a reader, you can kind of tell when something feels authentic. So I think if you can, I think a lot of the time it's a good idea. It's not always going to be. My characters are not me, but I think there's always a bit of me in them, or even sometimes there's a bit of me in lots of the different characters. Because really you can only come at things from your own perspective in a way, because you don't know what it's like to be anyone else. So
yeah. When it comes to family and friends that have read it, they said, "Oh, is that me?" or anything like that.
Oh yeah, a bit of that, yeah. Especially with friend requests, because the quite large chunks of it are set in 1989 when the characters are 16. So I totally used lots of my own, not direct copy experiences or direct copies of people, but I definitely used lots of my own experiences as a teenager. And yeah, loads of my friends were like, "Oh God, that's I remember that." Not exactly that, but and also people that I didn't really know when I wrote it that anyone was going to read it, but then it became quite successful. So I would get messages from girls who went to my school that I didn't really know saying, "Oh my God, that was the PE teacher, wasn't it?" I'm like, yeah, totally. But I just didn't think of it when I first wrote it, because I didn't know anyone was ever going to read it. So
when you first wrote it, before you took it to the course, how different would you say it was from the finished article?
I'd only written one chapter when I started the course, so I wrote the whole thing on the course pretty much, and a bit after. I kind of I'd had the idea for like a good few years, but not done anything with it. So I actually wrote the first chapter to apply for the course, because you had to have 3,000 words to apply, and I didn't have any words. So I wrote, sent it off, got accepted. So I think I've written maybe one more chapter before I started the course. So I had some people had whole novels. I had 2 chapters when I started. So, and then by the time I finished, the course was 3 months. By the time I finished, I was maybe about halfway through the book or so, and then I wrote it quite quickly in the following few months.
What advice would you say to people about getting over the hump? Because I've got to about 40,000 words on 3 occasions, and I'm still on the hump. So,
you just have to push on through. That is the only advice. And you have to like not listen to that voice that's like, oh, this is rubbish, like give up, like start something else, because it's not true. Like everybody feels like that at 40,000 words or 30 or wherever it is, different for different people. I find mine's about 30,000. But you just have to keep going. You just have to push through it. That is the only thing to do. And don't go back and start. Well, I mean, some people, I can't say, not, I don't know. Everyone's got their own process. But for me, it's not good at that point to start going back and trying to change the things at the beginning, even though I know by that point I'm like, well, that now doesn't work at the beginning, but I just had to keep going, and then I'll go back once I've got the whole story. Then I can go back and change the things that need changing.
I think that's why I decided to work on shorts, because I kept going back and editing the start of them.
I mean, some people do that. I mean, I know a friend, Laura Shepherd Robinson, who writes historical crime. I know she works on things as she goes, and she likes to get them absolutely right, and that's just her process, and it works for her. But for me, it's better to push on and get to the end and then go back, because otherwise I lose momentum, I think.
Do you like to read historical crime? Because I must admit, it's one of my favourite subgenres of crime.
I haven't read a lot, to be honest. I've read Laura's books, like Blood and Sugar and Daughters of Night. I've read a couple of CJ Sampson books years ago, but no, it's not a genre I read a lot of or know that much about. But I've enjoyed the ones I've read.
I think it's probably because of the challenge of the historical. What do you read? What do you read for your pleasure?
Psychological thrillers, basically. That's what I do. Ever since I read that Nikki French like 20 whatever years ago, mostly that was what I read for the next kind of 20 years. And now I get sent, like, I'm lucky that I get sent quite a lot of books, prior to publication, for me to comment or whatever. But mostly what I get sent, obviously, because that's what I write, that's what I get sent. So I'm lucky to get to read things often before they come out. So, but yeah, I sometimes it's nice to read something else actually for kind of a palate cleanser. So, I enjoy kind of just, I don't know how you describe it really, just sort of commercial fiction, I guess, but not crime, kind of modern commercial book clubby type fiction, I guess you'd probably call it.
It's interesting because I was speaking to James Henry this morning in a pre-recorded one that's going to go out later in the month, and he said he doesn't read crime because he doesn't like to be influenced by what he's reading. Do you find that a challenge as well?
Yeah, I do get that. But I just really like reading it, so I kind of can't stop myself, especially if I get something that sounds great and I've been looking forward to read. I can't really stop myself from reading it.
Are there any books coming out in the near future that haven't been published yet that you recommend to people that you've been sent particularly?
Oh gosh, what have I read that hasn't come out? I recently read Invite Me In by Emma Curtis. That is out now, I think. That was really good. Or it's coming out it's either out or coming out soon. There's a new one which I can't remember the title of it, which is not going to help. But I've seen it quite a lot on Twitter and I really want to read it. I haven't read it yet, but it's about the world of competitive gymnastics. It's like a kind of literary crime set in the world of competitive gymnastics. I think it's called something like, have you seen that? It's called All the Good Girls or something like that.
I'm gonna have to have a look for that. I must admit I did enjoy all the snowboarding or snow-based books that came out at the start of the year.
Yeah, I really enjoyed Erin Kelly's most recent book, which was set in the world of ballet. I guess, maybe I've got some similarities to that really competitive gymnastics world. That was what's Erin's book called?
Watch Her Fall,
Yes, Watch Her Fall. That was brilliant. Loved that. So I feel like this might be kind of along those lines, but gymnastics. It's Phoebe Morgan's the editor, so if you look on her Twitter, you'll see she was tweeting about it today. Looks great.
I must admit, I do enjoy looking at the new things that come out on Twitter. Who are the people that you discuss stuff with in DMs on private?
That'll be telling. There might be a few little groups going around, but I'm afraid I'm not at liberty to say.
little groups are great for learning about new authors. Is there anybody out there that's not been published yet that you'd say, oh, this is a person to look for?
Yeah, a friend of mine called Jo Hogan, actually. Her book, I think, is probably not coming out till next year, but I'm really looking forward to that. Who else? Oh, God, I should have had to think about this, because when you're on the spot and your mind goes absolutely blank. I can't think. Sorry, that's bad. I'll try and think about it.
That's fine. I'll drop some names in after if you come up with any. So,
yeah.
I'll drop some names into the group.
Yeah.
When it comes to finding what you can do when you're not writing, what do you like to do in your downtime?
Well, I've got 2 kids, so that keeps me reasonably busy. Although they're a bit older, they're 14 and 12, so they're not little ones anymore. I run, actually. Got quite into running in the last couple of years. I'm not at all a fast or competitive runner. I'm an extremely slow runner, in fact. But I really like it. I just, not so much even for the physical benefits, but I just find it quite just great for the kind of mental headspace, which is weird because I never thought I would like running, because I was not a sporty child, didn't like it at school, so I do that. I mean, one of the great things actually about becoming and kind of getting a new career. So I was 42 or something, 43 when my first book came out, so it was kind of a new career for me. So one of the really great things actually about that has been kind of meeting loads of new people in my 40s, which I think is quite an unusual, often it's quite hard to meet new people as an adult, I think, isn't it? So that's been great. So I've got a kind of new bit of a, sort of social life related to publishing. There's always like a book launch or a festival or, whatever. And I've got a kind of really nice supportive group of writer friends. So I like hanging out with them when I can.
Yeah, I've just come back from Harrogate myself. I don't know whether you were there.
I was, yeah, but I hadn't connected you. I saw you there, but I hadn't connected. I didn't realize. I didn't know who you were. I would have come and said hello. Yeah. Any artists that I realized.
Yeah.
Next time I will.
That's fine. I mean, I do get everywhere, including falling down a hole that I didn't intend to. Yeah. Me and Derek Farrell were walking by the bar, and I wasn't looking where I was going, and I fell down a hole.
That sounds like a pretty standard Harrogate experience.
Yeah. What's the most unusual experience you've had at festivals or events?
Oh, well, the first year I went to Harrogate was 2017. So that was just before my first book came. My first book came out in July. No, was it just after? When's Harrogate? July. It was around about the time my first book. Anyway, I think it was just before. Yeah, it was just before. And that year, Claire McIntosh, who I'd never met before, but she's published by my publisher. We share an editor. I never met her, and she was there, and she'd gone in her camper van because I can't remember why, but she sort of parked it up pretty much on the lawn at Harrogate. So I found myself having never met her before, and obviously she was like, she's a huge big deal. And I was going to say to me then, but even to me now, she's like a huge big, writing star. I found myself in her camper van, and I hadn't had any dinner, so she was giving me like Rivitas and Baby Bells and stuff that she had in there for her kids. That was probably quite high up there.
I must admit, Claire is lovely, and I've got some of her early books as review copies that she actually gave me while I was at Harrogate. So there's one on the shelf.
Yeah,
I think it's his second one. What's your most favourite book of hers? Because I know a new one's just come out.
I haven't read the new one yet. I haven't read Hostage. I think my favourite's probably still I Let You Go, just because of that twist, that midpoint twist, which is just like
brilliant
twist ever. And I did not see it coming, but then it's the perfect twist because you don't see it coming, but then when you look back, you're like, oh my God, it's obvious.
Yeah.
But she set it up so it's not, it's a total shock, but it makes total sense, which is what you need in a twist. Like that is, yeah, I love. I was just floored by that twist. I loved it.
Psychological thrillers do have a fair few twists. And what would you say is the biggest challenge about finding when and where to plant the twist or the seed for it?
Yeah, well, I think it's what I just said. Actually, it's making it's keeping it a secret so that people don't guess, or I don't mind if people guess if they think, oh, it might be that, and then they're proved right. That's fine, but like, you don't want it to be completely obvious, but at the same time, it can't be a complete surprise that you haven't seeded in at all, because then that's cheating the reader. Because if you get to the end of the book and suddenly it's like, oh, actually, whatever, something turns something on its head, but then you can't look back at the book and see, oh yeah, of course it is. So it's finding that balance between it being a proper surprise, but not being such a kind of about face that it doesn't make any sense. So I think that's definitely the key.
When you're working on your writing, what would you say is the thing you thought, oh, I wish I could have kept that in, but then you took it out, or you either come up with something afterwards because when you reread it for an event or something?
I don't tend to ever read them again once I've finished them. Once the final proofread, that's it. I kind of
Yeah.
And I've never listened to one of my audiobooks actually. Although I was thinking I might listen to this one, because as I was saying to you earlier, I know the narrator. She's a friend of mine. She's a very good voiceover artist and actress who's recorded it. So I would quite like to listen to this one. But well, I mean, to be honest, there was a couple of issues, kind of little minor plot holes that came up in the recording of the audiobook. Because it was a friend of mine that was the actress that's doing it. She actually called me and was like, Laura, this doesn't make sense. I was like, oh God, that's it. So we changed them for the audio. I was like, okay. So I just quickly rewrote it because she was literally in the recording studio. I mean, they weren't massive things to do.
Yeah.
Just little things, but there was a couple of little things that didn't quite make sense. So I changed them for the audiobook and we changed them for the ebook, because obviously that can be changed up to the last minute, but it was too late.
Yeah.
For the first printing of the hardback, it was too late. So there are two little mistakes. So I'm just waiting for someone to point them out to me. So I've read the hardback. You won't, because it's okay.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
but that's a little challenge for anyone that's got the hardbacks, if you can work out
Yeah.
what they are.
Yeah. Interesting. Considering that you know the narrator and you discuss the book, does that give you a different insight as to what it's like for that other form of the book, I suppose, because it's not really the same book if it's on audio as it would be in paper, I would imagine.
Yeah, no, definitely. So I hadn't really thought that much about it before, but she called me a few other times, just not to point out plot holes, but just with questions about, what do you think about this? And, questions that I just hadn't considered in the written form, but that needed answering when it was being recorded, when it's being recorded as an audiobook.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely some things came up that I hadn't considered before. I'm not really an audiobook listener. I've never actually, don't think I've ever listened to an audiobook.
Well, they are growing, and to be honest, without audiobooks, I'd be a bit kind of alien, really, because
God, yeah, absolutely. No,
yeah,
brilliant. They are brilliant. And I think be great just generally, because you can do it whilst you're doing something else as well. But no, I've not. I think I will get into them. I just haven't yet.
I was just thinking about what I might end up writing about. Is there any location or place you've ever been to and you thought, oh, I might write about this, but you've not done it yet? Or
quite often, yeah. I was the book I'm writing at the moment, actually, part of it's set in Italy. And I was meant to be going to Italy a couple of weeks ago, and I was thinking, oh, great, I'm going to be able to be, so I've written the Italy sections, but I've never actually been to Italy. So I was thinking, well, that'd be great. I can make something up, and then I'll be able to kind of add to that, add a lot of flavour and thing. But obviously, because of COVID, I wasn't able to go, so I just have to Google Earth it or something. But quite often I'll be in a location. Yeah, I mean, often because I write crime, you can often be in a location you think, well, this would be great, whether it's a deserted car park or, kind of like a cave where the water comes in and fills it up at certain times of day, things like that, yeah, quite often. Yeah.
Yeah, sounds very intriguing. Of all the friends you got in the industry, what would you say is the best location that they might have put a body, or you're jealous about?
Oh, that's a good question. Oh gosh. Oh God, my mind's gone blank again. Sorry. This is
That's all right. It's
it later.
perfectly fine now. Because I don't plan the questions for the interview. It all depends on what the person says. So half the time, yeah. So it's perfectly fine, and we'll just discuss it on Twitter, and I'll put it in the group after. It's fine.
Actually, I mean, I've just thought of something. I know we've already spoken about this, but my favourite Nikki French book, there's something very evocative about. So it was their friend, two girls, friends as teenagers. One of them's now an adult. The other one disappeared. They never found her body, never to be seen again. And then years and years and years later, they find it in the garden of the family home. So I mean that's always very kind of like, because obviously then it's like, well, somebody in the family knows what happened to somebody, put her there. I'm always I like those kind of family sort of those kind of family mysteries, if you like.
I'm just going to get my assistant to read the comments at the side. I don't know whether you can see them yourself.
Yes, I can. Yeah.
I don't. If there's any questions from the audience in there, I don't know whether there is, because I can't.
Yeah, a couple of things. I don't know if I've. So Facebook user enjoyed the anniversary. Thank you very much. I don't know who that is. So some of them are only showing as Facebook user, but maybe that's because they only want to be. Are my books available? Oh, somebody's asking, are my books available in Kindle, please? Yes, they are. Yes, they're all available in Kindle. I think Frame Request might be 99p at the moment. It certainly was recently, so it's a bargain. And my new one's out in Kindle and hardback and audiobook at the moment, and the paperback will be out next year sometime. Somebody has asked, if you were walking past a derelict building, would you be able to form an idea and then insert it into your book? From Andrew. Well, that's kind of what we were just talking about. Absolutely, yes. Often, all my books, I think, often have been sparked from a single idea, and often that can be a place, it can be a person or something you hear on the radio or whatever, but definitely a place can spark an idea and you can put it into a book. Absolutely, yeah. That's it, I think, for questions.
Yeah, I'm just imagining a derelict building and things. What is the book you read that scared you? Because the derelict building could have lots of hidden corners in it.
I think the only books, I don't really get scared by crime thrillers. The only books that have ever really scared me are Stephen King books, I think. So, which I was probably younger when I read, like The Shining and Misery, and I read a couple of others when I was younger as well. So I think I say horror books I find scary. I don't really feel scared in crime books. I feel tense and, kind of like page turning. Oh my God, I need to know what's going to happen. But I don't ever really feel scared in a crime novel.
Are you influenced by like anything like telly or anything like that?
I think probably influenced by everything. I mean, I like a good crime drama on the telly. Although I think it's quite a different form, isn't it? Different structure. I think I'm definitely much more influenced by the books I've read, because I've always been a massive reader, like since I was a child. So I think I'm quite I write quite instinctively. I think I don't want to sound like a woo woo, but I think it's just because I've read so much. I know all writers are readers, aren't they? But it's almost like I've absorbed the kind of structuring of a book and the pace just by osmosis, just by having read so many books, that I find it, I write quite instinctively. Obviously I have to go back and structure and edit and blah blah blah, but when I'm doing a kind of first draft, I don't think about it that much. I just write, it just sort of comes out.
Given that you don't generally think about it a lot in the first draft, is it quick for the first draft or is it slower?
Well, from request, I wrote really quickly because I felt like I was on I didn't have a deadline as such, but because the woman who runs the course, the Curtis Brown course, has said, I think you got a chance here, but you need to write it quickly. So I was like, God, I just thought I can't kind of waste this chance, that if someone says that to you, you don't throw it away. So I did write that quickly. So I can write quickly. This one's coming a bit slower, the one I'm writing at the moment. I mean, the anniversary I wrote partly in the lockdown and everything, and I had my children at home, so there were practical difficulties with writing that, so that was a bit slower. The one I'm writing now also coming a bit slower, but I think that's because I haven't planned it as much as I normally do, so I'm making it up as I go along, if you like, a bit more than I normally do. So I'm kind of plotting and planning as I go.
Yeah. So you'd say that you're generally a planner normally then?
Normally I am, but this fourth one, the one that I'm writing now, is less planned. I still know where I'm going and what's going to happen, but definitely haven't planned it as much as I normally do, which has had its pros and cons, I think.
Thank you so much for this evening. I think we'll probably leave it there. Have you got anything that you want to tell us that's coming? Or
no, that was great. Yeah. Really good chat. Thank you.
Thanks so much for tonight, and hopefully everybody else enjoyed it. And we've got Dr. David Wilson next week, talking about his chronology in his book. Trying to remember the name of it now. Plot to Kill. See, it's a plot to kill. It's not just the authors that forget things.
Well, I shouldn't forget things really in books that I wrote, but there we are.
Thank you, and see you guys all next week.